Hey, this is Andre Hartunian from Hexen, and you're experiencing Poppet's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Poppet's Corner. I am super excited to be bringing on somebody local here, and I love doing the in-person interviews. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I want to thank my good buddy, Mr. Joe C. of the Fallen Electric and the Foobar Show for coming on and hanging. Joe, how you doing, man? Thanks for giving me a few minutes of your time here, man.
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is fun. Yeah. It's interesting, dude. I do a weekly podcast, but it's rare that I do somebody else's podcast. And like I was saying earlier, man, I don't think I've ever been this sober doing a podcast in a long time. There's always beers and that kind of smelly things happening in the background.
Do you prefer to go into an interview? Let's just say like an interview, because I don't know. I'm not particularly familiar with everything the Foobar Show does. I've been on it. And thank you very much again for having me.
It's been a while. You need to be back.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But do you like to go into your interviews on your said guests sober, or do you like going in with like a little bit more leniency, as I'll call them, with the beverages?
I like a little leniency only because it makes me less self-aware of where I'm at and helps me focus on what's in front of me rather than being really in my head. I'm a giant nerd as it is anyway, so I'm already over prepared with questions and bullet points that I have on my notes on my laptop anyway. So if I veer off into some crazy tangent, at least this is something that'll keep me, in line. So I can relax a little bit. It just helps me relax. But that's just me. It's not for everybody.
Well, what do you think? Where do you think that kind of comes from? And we'll get to let me explain the basis of the show.
Yeah,
real quick.
Of course.
So usually, what I like to do is I like to go through the guest's entire musical career, and with your case, we'll talk about the podcast, of course.
Sure,
it's part of it. So anyway, but before we get to that stuff, I'm just kind of curious with your said interviews and whatnot. What are you kind of looking for when you're interviewing guys? Like, what is like kind of like your goal, I guess?
Well, I always and part of the Foobar Show and the reason we started doing it, or a lot of the meat and potatoes of the podcast itself, is a lot of comic book stuff, a lot of music, sports, anything that's in the pop culture that's relevant. And there's nothing like a good origin story. Talking about comic books, the origin story, that first movie is always the most exciting one, how that person kind of came to be, and kind of that coming of age even. So when I'm interviewing somebody, I really like to, probably you share something similar, is that you want to get their entire life story, or at least what led you to become this awesome artist or podcaster or whoever it is that I'm interviewing. That origin story, it's always different for everybody. And it's always very entertaining because it's never the same for anybody. And even then, if I have somebody on again after we've discussed their origin story, they left something out, and so we'll go into some crazy tangents on that too. So it's been a cool ride, man, and that's just kind of how I get by.
Now, with this in mind, I got to ask you this: where but you're always going to get something different from every person that you interview. There's always a different story. But speaking for me personally, I want to know if this is the same for you. But I've always found this lineage that we're actually all the same. We just got there in different ways.
Of course, yeah. Pretty much, how did we all get to this point, right? What roads did we take, kind of thing?
Right. But we all like, for a musician and whatnot, it's always, especially in I'm just going to preface this, obviously I play more extreme metal, heavy metal band, right?
Yeah.
But I always, with all my guests and whatnot, when they come on, they just start with a different band to get that led them to this road.
Oh, totally.
So that's like,
everybody has that story, right? For sure.
Right. Yeah. So, and obviously we'll get to yours and whatnot, but I'm just generally curious, just as a fellow journalist, as I'll call you.
Sure.
I not an interviewer or a podcaster, but a journalist such as yourself. I'm just genuinely curious what you're specifically looking for as far as is what you want to get that guest to how you want that guest to be perceived, I guess, by the public.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I always like to present the artist or podcaster or whoever's in front of me in the best light possible. You know, I'm inviting them on because I think they're awesome or they have something interesting to share with the world. So you know, I don't know. I guess just being a fan, like I fangirl a lot, you know, while they're there. There's been a few bands that have come in and I'm just like, dude, it's first time meeting you, even though I've been a fan for years. There's another band. There's this band that I've followed since like freshman year in high school. You may know them. They're called Antagonists from Whittier, California. Carlos and the drummer came by and did the podcast one day. I was like, bro, like, it's probably the first time that I've actually had like a full on conversation with those dudes, and they're just they're great guys, and I was just fangirling the whole goddamn time. But I had my notes in front of me, so I didn't go too far out. But it was fun.
Now, when you're writing the notes, are there just focal points, like where you're not going to write the full question, you just write like a piece of it, so then you can...
A theme, yeah, a theme, and then whenever there's an opportunity, because we go into tangents, obviously, and so I was like, oh, cool, well, that kind of dovetailed into this bullet point that I wanted to ask. So yeah, I like to just be prepared with it because I've been. When the podcast first started and we were just winging it, it just didn't, I don't know. The podcast is a real different thing than it was 3 years ago when we started. So we've grown quite a bit. I'm proud of what we've done, despite the fact that we don't spend tons of cash on it. It's just all about being crafty and just having that, it's all about discipline, really. Having that discipline to care and trusting your people too, because I have 3 co-hosts. 2 have been on for the last year and a half pretty regularly because the third one, which we call the Foo, he just had a kid, so he's kind of been busy doing that, and no harm done there. We love him and his family, so we support that. But Josh and Steph just happens to be my wife, so she's just, that's convenient as hell. And so they help out tremendously. I do the production and kind of I direct traffic, and Josh, being a big geek about comic books and sports, I'll let him kind of do his thing, and I just make fun of him the entire time. Steph chimes in with some zingers too, and it just makes for a good time. And I think that the fact that when we're doing the podcast, our guard is down, so we take jabs at each other. It just creates some good comedy and some good talk.
Now, can I just ask you this and just start with the podcast? Because
Sure.
I obviously I'm so used to doing musical talk that I never get the opportunity to talk about a podcast.
Sure.
So I'm just generally curious, why start the Foobar show, and what time period are we talking about?
Holy shit. Okay, so we're in season 4 right now. So this would have been about 4 years ago, give or take. It'll be almost 5, I think, in May. So anyway, back then, we all lived together. Well, we call ourselves the Foos, and the reason for that. So I'll go back. I'm gonna go way back. When I was in college, I met the Foo. I don't know if he wants me to use his name, but we call him the Foo on the show. We used to work at Best Buy, and we became really, really good friends. We're each other's best man for each other's weddings. So that's how tight we are. But anyway, back then, we would just always just kind of clown on each other and just take jabs, just ruthless, freaking just making fun of each other. Hilarious. A few years go by. Out of college, we all have our jobs, and then we all lease a house in West Covina, which is where you've been. And so from there, we started to just invite people over, and we got a few comments saying, if you guys just recorded what you guys were saying, it would make for some entertaining content. And so I don't know, like maybe a year went by after a couple people were saying stuff like that to us, and then we went to a trip in Joshua Tree, and we during like a shroom session, I was just looking at the stars, and the guys will tell you out of nowhere, I'm like, you know what, guys, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna start a podcast, and they're like, what? Like, yeah, man. Start a podcast. And then for my birthday, the Foo got me a couple of cheap little microphones as kind of saying, we should probably consider doing this. And I said, okay, well, and I had a musical background. I know a little bit about audio and audio production. I was like, oh, let me just get a mixer. Let's see what we can do. And so we did it. And, it was off to a bumpy start. It wasn't perfect, but I just like, step one is just do it. Just start doing it. That's really what it's about for everybody listening. If you're hesitant about it because it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be perfect. You just got to start doing it, and you learn and grow from there. YouTube is your friend for like all these instructional videos and stuff like that. Just have an open mind, be a big nerd, take notes, learn, absorb, and you're going to get better. Surround yourself with awesome people.
Now, let me go back to when you and the Foo met. I'm sure he has a first name. I'm sure he wouldn't mind us using his actual first name.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can tell us who at least the first name.
Brandon.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm just kind of curious, the bond between you and Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Why do you think you guys like bonded so well and just have stuck together so well since the college days? Were you fans of, like, I don't know, comics, and that's how you bonded together, or books, or
interestingly not. At least speaking personally, I've always appreciated comics and that art form, but I never really owned a bookshelves of comics. My wife does. His cousin Josh, who's the other host on the show, they really bring that to the show. What him and I are really good at is taking what, I don't know, just expanding on a conversation, taking it into a crazy tangent, and or just poke fun of it, poke fun, relentlessly. I've always been fascinated by improv comedy. One of my favorite comedians is Adam Carolla, and so he's one of the best to think like on his feet. Amongst other comedians that I really appreciate too, that use those tools that you learn from improv. It's all about yes, and not only that, but if you bring a conversation to a screeching halt, that's the end of the conversation, and you don't have any substance. So just those simple tools that we kind of share amongst each other, and knowing when to speak up and say, hey man, you kind of suck there, or, just being brutally honest with each other and knowing what to say to get the person to react and just get better as a presenter.
Let me go back to another point that you had mentioned, where, just do it, right? You just do the podcast. I think a lot of people are hesitant about doing stuff just in general based off fear and based off not being comfortable with themselves and not and knowing who they are, if that makes sense. So like, no, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to have the public scrutinize you, because guess what? That's what it's going to happen. So as long as you know who you are and you're comfortable with yourself, again, just go do it. Right?
And when we mess up and we do something, we're just like, it shouldn't have gone that way. It's pretty funny anyway. And if you just learn how to laugh at it, it's nobody's going to care. Nobody cares.
Do you think that that's based solely on the world we live in today, where people want real, honest, just dialogue and conversations, right? And not for political reasons, but everything out there just seems so fake in general. The podcasting world, whatever you want to call it, has generally risen in popularity because of that.
Because it's the Wild West. Yeah,
it's free. It's
you do what you want, pretty much.
Right, and everybody, but it seems like everybody has their own personality, and even just how they ask the questions, how they I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but how they kind of articulate themselves. And you have a very different approach than what I do, obviously. So as a guest, how are you like separating yourself from being the interviewer to being the guest? That's always a hard conflict for me.
I get it. I kind of want to interview you right now. Like, but no, it is a fine line. It's all about just knowing at this point, I just want to respect. I don't want to step on any toes, but yeah, you'll probably get a few questions from me throughout this interview. But I don't know, man. It's just I guess don't take yourself so seriously is what it comes down to, no matter who you are, because people are going to see through that. If you're somebody who's just like uptight, stick up his ass, and just wants everything to be perfect, yeah, it's not gonna happen as quickly, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
So after you guys kind of like meet each other and whatnot, where does the name Foobar come from,
So,
and why settle on that specific name?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but here it goes. So when we worked at Best Buy, there was this guy named Eric, and Eric, he looked like this. He was our age, so he wasn't like an older dude, but he was like this cholo dude. And at every sentence, he would address us as "What's up, fool?" Like, "Hey, fool, 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 this, fool, that." And we were friendly with him. He wasn't a bad guy. He was just that's just how he talked. But we started like kind of in jest, just making fun of him, sort of. And we would do it to his face, "So fool," and like that kind of thing. So, and we did it so much that it just kind of became a part of our vernacular to when we spoke with each other. Like, and we're just like, all right, dude, this isn't funny anymore. And then we did it even more and more, and then it came back around to being funny. And so it's kind of like an inside joke, and that's why we call ourselves the Foos, that kind of thing. So and we're just like, well, we got the equipment to do a podcast. What's the name of the podcast? So after creating this long laundry list of potential names and just no, finally I'm just like, well, there's Foobar, even though it's spelled Fubar, fucked up beyond all recognition. Military term from back in the like World War II era, maybe even before that. But we just played with it, and as a pun, we called it the Foobar Show because we only expected things to go wrong too. That's another thing, and always poking fun at the fact that something's not always going to go right. And I haven't edited the audio on our podcast in probably around 2, maybe 3 years. So, and only because I discovered that it's a better podcast when you just let it flow. And if something goes wrong, we address it and we just make fun of it, and we're just relentless about it. And it's made for a good time.
It seems like it's more authentic that way. More authentic, again, realism.
Yeah.
Right. You want that, especially in your dialogue.
Sure.
It seems like it's so crucial in a time when things aren't as real as what we once thought they were.
Right.
So
yeah.
Moving ahead and whatnot. How did the Foobar Show get its like almost identity at first? What were some of the topics that you guys wanted to take on when you first started the show? Obviously it's changed drastically since, but I'm talking initially started. What was kind of your goal? Do you just want to talk like about the weather, about about cars? I mean, what was the general topic?
I guess fundamentally the show has not really changed. It's just how our approach to it. So it's always been pop culture. And when we started the show, Josh was not a part of the show, and I think we and he just so happened to live there with us that at some point he became a guest. We didn't discover it, but we started appreciating his knowledge about like comic books and his ability to speak on them with a lot of detail. And then at a certain point, the Foo says, "You know what, guys, this probably isn't for me," even though he was one of the founders and arguably, his name is on the freaking title of the show. At a certain point, he's like, it's this. I'm probably not about this life. So we said, okay, well, hey, Josh, your bedroom is right there. Would you like to come 10 feet over to the right and be on the show? Because I kind of want to keep this going. To me, it's kind of like therapy. I get to just let it all out. Throughout the week, I'm kind of in a corporate position for work, so I have to really censor myself when it comes
you don't get to let loose
from Monday to Friday until I'm on a stage with my band or I'm doing the podcast. So for me, it's very therapeutic, very kind of cathartic even. And then Steph didn't really join the show full time until probably 3 years ago, even still. So when it started, it was just me and the Foo and a friend of mine. We've unfortunately, we're not friends anymore. His name was David, and he was really instrumental in helping me pick out the equipment and that kind of thing. So million thanks to him, despite the fact that we had a falling out. But the foundation was very much, let's talk about what's going on in pop culture. The Foo was very much a fan of sports. I'm like, well, I mean, I appreciate sports. People don't think that I know a lot about sports. I know more than people think I know about sports. I can speak, and if I can, I'll make fun of it, and so which makes for some entertainment. But that's it. Again, it's just one of those things where we didn't know what we were going to do. Let's talk about what's happening in pop culture with comic books, a new TV show that we're really interested in, maybe video games. We were messing around with all kinds of segments, but apart, it was still in that realm of pop culture. And me just being a fan of all kinds of music, we've always had that music highlights segment in there too. And we've messed around with all kinds of other segments, but that's really the core of the whole thing. It's just what's happening.
Interesting. Did you start to notice more podcasts around this area pop up, or were you guys one of the only ones kind of doing it that to your knowledge? Like, when did you start to figure out that there are other podcasts happening around this specific area?
Yeah. You obviously want to network with other people to see what they're doing, how they're doing it, what equipment they're using, just so you can kind of maybe try to incorporate the best practices into your own podcast. But yeah, I was noticing quite a few other podcasts pop up. Thing is, we've outlasted them. They'll probably do, and I left this part out. We were doing the podcast maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Well,
hold on, not to cut you off, but that's convenient for you because
we live in the same house.
You live in the same house. It's not like,
yeah, I get that. So, I'm not saying it, that it was, I think we would have still done it though, at least maybe twice a week, just because we were that close with each other back then. Not saying we're not anymore, but we don't, we all live in different cities now that are significantly further away than us living in the same freaking house. But yeah, that's a good point. But when exploring other podcasts, they were, and not to put any of them down because they were all pretty cool, but ours was segmented because I grew up listening to Adam Carolla and his Adam Carolla show when he was on KLSX, which no longer exists on the radio. The Kevin and Bean show, which was on K-Rock for all those years. Mark and Brian, those kinds of, like, I don't want to call them a morning zoo because those exist, where it's just chaos happening for, from 6 to 10 every weekday. But there was actual substance and it was genuinely funny. So me being a fan of that kind of structure and segmented program, I found that it when you segment it and kind of compartmentalize it, you can cut it up into clips a lot easier that way. You can promote it a little bbit easier. I found it to be a little bit more digestible because that's kind of what I knew too. So that's why we did it the way we did. And not to put anybody down, and because I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but those other podcasts that we became friendly with, they were just one topic. Like, for example, we had a friendly podcast. They've been on the show for a couple times. That particular podcast no longer exists, but they're called the what were they called? Anyway, it'll come to me. But they would talk about movies. They would pick a movie every week, a movie that perhaps wasn't as appreciated. And for example, like the Phantom Menace, Star Wars, the Phantom Menace. I guess, when it came out, it wasn't received very well, but they found good things to talk about. Like they're like, no, Jar Jar Binks be damned. Everything else in this movie was pretty cool. The pod racing, all that cool stuff. It brought back Star Wars back in 1999. And so they would hype something up. Damn, what was it called? They still do something similar to that, but it's not the something ones. Josh is gonna kill me, but they're awesome guys. But anyway, what I was getting at is that they would just talk about one thing. And I was just like, well, I don't want to just talk about one thing. I don't want to just talk about, this this band that just came out. I want to talk about this and that and that. And it would make for like maybe 3-hour podcast. It would rival a fucking Joe Rogan episode, that would be 3 or 4 hours. But it allowed me to cut it up because it was segmented. So we would be able to put out maybe 2 or 3 episodes per week.
And you guys never did this live, right? It was all pre-recorded. It wasn't like,
for the most part, I can count with my hands how many times we've done it live. It wasn't even that many times. We're up to episode 261 coming up this weekend. And we got there rather quickly in the first year or two because we were doing more than one a week. Now it's 52 episodes a year because it's once a week, give or take. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
And it's still obviously, you're still obviously going with it, and still, I mean, are there any new ground? Is there any new ground that you guys want to cover that maybe you haven't in the last 5 years since it's been around?
We've never lost the spirit of us just messing around with let's talk about something else, or this can be a new segment. For example, like we had for an entire year we had the spiciest foods of all time, which is we would get like, I don't know if you've ever had that one chip challenge. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, and I don't want to tell. It's like when I watch the Hot Ones podcast.
Yeah. So the food buys these chips.
It's a chip,
and it's one chip, and we eat it. And dude, I was doubled over. My Steph was worried she was gonna have to take me to the ER. It was painful. And one thing, if anybody's gonna try anything like this, I just suggest don't throw up, because you're reintroducing that spice back in your esophagus. And it's just the worst. I mean, you want it only going one way. You just want to go one way because it's a bad time. You're going to have a bad time. Anyway, so that was a segment that we did. For a while, we did Food Facts, where it's just like random facts and we would take turns. I don't know, like just stupid facts that we would do.
It sounds like one of those books you put in the bathroom and read.
Exactly. Yeah, something like that. The Foo, he's a huge Godzilla fan, so we would do Podzilla. That was a segment and I think we're going to revive that this weekend. We went all the way from the first ever Godzilla movie, which I think was made in the 50s, 30s. That sounds right. Japan. And then we did it all the way one by one in chronological order of release, all the way to the early 80s. And I think we're going to pick up this weekend.
Well, if you want to go even further than that, without King Kong, there is no Godzilla.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally what Godzilla was derived from, was King Kong. So,
yeah. It was supposed to look like an ape.
Right.
Yeah, not a lizard.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But that's interesting that you say Godzilla, because I kind of wish there were more Godzilla stuff out there as far as movies go.
Yeah.
Because at a time that was really prevalent. So everything was Godzilla in like the 50s, 60s, and from Toho.
Right.
So that's obviously kind of died down a little bit.
Well, we're getting a new series coming out. Yeah. And there's another like anime series that came out not too long ago. Japan, I think, has been hanging on to it pretty well, and they do things really well over there anyway. It's just a matter of, making more people need to love Godzilla. God damn it. That's what I'm saying.
That way we don't get a Godzilla with Matthew Broderick or anything.
We don't talk about that one. Okay. We skipped that one. Okay. Yeah.
So moving forward and whatnot with the Foobar show. So you have your hosts, as I call them. Who were some of your first guests that you had on, and how did you approach just even getting the guests on? Did you tell them like, hey, we're going to talk about this, or just, hey, you want to just come on and just hang with us?
Well, let me ask you, Tanner, do you remember, because you were one of the first guests in that first year, what was your experience? Because I mean, back then we would just contact people via like Instagram or Facebook and say, hey, I checked you out, I really like your stuff. I think me and you had we were friendly with Nelson, Metalhead Nelson. He told me to hit you up, and I think that's how it went down. No. So I think how we found each other. So Nelson had said, hey, I have a podcast. I'm going on this podcast. Okay.
so I watched Nelson and you do the podcast together. I can't remember what the topic was.
Mhm.
I can't remember any of that,
Yeah.
but I just remember, wow, this is really professional. I need to incorporate some of this into my show that I do, because I had just started.
Oh,
I just started Poppet's Corner and whatnot, and wanted to, I don't know, because I'm a music nerd. I just love music, right? Especially heavy metal and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I was like, how am I gonna be professional at this, but still be unprofessional at the same time?
Sure, yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So, meaning like, because I don't take myself that seriously and whatnot. So I was like, their audio is stellar. How are they getting this audio? Because I was using a phone at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I was almost, I'm like, how did I, so I randomly hit you up and said, hey, really digging your podcast. I love the audio of this. How are you doing this? Because I'm using my phone and I can't get the audio from my board into my phone.
Right.
And I think you had said, oh yeah, you can use guitar iRig or something. So I used the iRig.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. For the video component, so that the video component can have the clear audio to it. Yeah, we've the iRig 2 is what you can go out of your board into your phone and with that lightning jack if you have an iPhone. So anybody out there who's wondering, that's how you do it.
So at the time I had no idea how to do this. So I'm still very thankful to you, by the way. Just know that. So that's how we connected that way. And I was like, and you're like, well, why don't you come on the show and see how it works? I'm like, I would love to.
Yeah. I remember, it's all coming back to me now.
So I was a bit taken back. I was honored, and I still am, obviously. But at that time, I was wet behind the ears. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing, because I was doing mostly audio stuff, and I wanted to get into the video world, but I didn't know how to.
Right.
Not a lot of my friends were doing podcasts. I didn't know where to turn. So when I found your show, I was like, this is awesome. How can I apply that audio into, and obviously remain friends with them at the same time, but apply that into what I'm doing and make my show better, just like how they're doing their show just as great. So props to you guys, obviously.
And and honestly, I have nothing to hide. If somebody asks me, I'm going to tell them exactly how I do it. And I think that's how you build the relationship.
But at that time, there weren't people that wanted to discuss that. There were people that is almost a competition factor.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
That's not how you build a culture and a community.
Right.
It's all about sharing ideas and how to do stuff. And it's I don't know. I think that the more we build that kind of community, the better quality everybody's going to have, and we don't have to compete.
Well, there's be no way we can compete with Poppet's Corner will never compete with the Foobar show, and the Foobar show will never compete with Poppet's Corner, because we're on separate islands.
Right.
I'm doing my own thing. You're doing your own thing. Your topics are different from my topics. So I'm doing, and it's a completely different format with the long form discussion that we're doing. Your show is it's almost like a TV show. That's what I got from going into that place, because I was like, wow, this is really fresh. You got an intro. You got other audio that's coming through the board. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here through the headphones. And I'm like,
and dude, like if I were to show you again what it's still as elementary as it was back then. I'm just using QuickTime on my Mac. I'm using GarageBand to capture the sound. And I talk to other podcasters on some forum online, like on Facebook or something, and they get a little uppity about the kind of software. It's just like, no, dude, it's just capture the audio and press it a little bit. If there's some levels that are out, you're fine. And as long as you're running everything forward, the computer itself being one of them, if you have a bunch of drops, just press play on the drop and it'll run through and it'll record it. It's not a big deal. I think people overthink it.
Yeah, I think so too, but also people, I wasn't confident. That's the thing too. You guys gave me some confidence when it came to the sound and being almost, well, they're doing it this way. I could do it just like that, and then work and then build upon it. And then maybe one day I can teach them a little bit, and they can teach me. So it's always this ebb and flow of information, and it's so valuable. I guess I can speak for both of us, right? Information is very valuable, especially in the podcasting. So again, thank you for that in advance. But yeah, that's how I remember going on the Foobar show. Was these guys are really professional. They put my show to shame as far as, again, because I wasn't doing what I'm doing now then. I was merely uploading. I was trying to capture and document a community out here specifically when at a time when nobody was doing that. And there's still not a lot of people doing it out here.
Yeah.
So what you have is, since I'm like, I have all these killer musicians and killer people such as yourself, it's easy for me to bring you guys on the show and talk to you about your guys' stories and whatnot, because nobody else is doing it out here.
And I think we're a specific breed of cat too. I maybe back in the day, it was the guy who would follow, I don't know, a community of bands or a genre and would make a zine out of it. You know, I don't see that guy anymore. I think that guy is now your podcaster, you and me, maybe, you know? So yeah, I get it.
Well, and obviously too, you know, with this in mind, it was just invaluable. It was just, that information was just invaluable to me. So again, that's what I got from the Foobar show. So if we can, let's start from your specific musical journey. I want to get into the Fallen Electric and kind of the essence of that. So when was your first recollections of just kind of hearing music for the first time, and what was the band that you that got you into music?
Well, as a small child, I've been an only child my whole life. So and on top of that, I've been pretty sheltered. We've never been destitute or anything like that. Well, I've always had a roof over my head and that kind of thing. But my parents were very frugal. So there wasn't a whole lot, you know, people tell me all the time, oh, you were only child, you must have been spoiled. Nah, I didn't have much to work with. You know, and then couple that with having parents that were incredibly cheap, that probably didn't help out at all either. But anyway, they love their music, immigrants. So they love their instrumental, Mexican music. So growing up on all that, that's really all I knew until like maybe age 10, when my older cousins that were their Generation Xers, so they were listening to what was coming out in that 90s period. So I was getting hit in the face every time I'd go to a family function, and you know, maybe I'd go play Super Nintendo with my cousins who were significantly older than I. They would always say too, he's like, "You're an old soul, man. It's like we've known you." I'm a little kid, and they're like they're in high school, but I can hang. They were just hitting me in the face with like Pearl Jam, Santana, AC/DC, you know, things that were huge for a Generation Xer. And so that I was absorbing all of that. I already had an appreciation for music. In elementary school, I was always first chair in whatever instrument I picked up: saxophone, clarinet, flute, and their variations like baritone sax or even tenor sax, alto sax, all that. I've always been really good with music, with patterns, kind of recognizing that kind of stuff. So when I started hearing, you know, what could be done with an electric guitar, I was like, this world exists. I can like it. And then the lyrics that they were singing is so well crafted. So again, I guess my first exposure was that 90s grunge alternative. And I never stopped loving it. I still bump that to this day. And that's been my number one music love. But there was a lot of other types of genres that led, you know, that were more traditional because of my parents. And so, and I've been fortunate that they didn't poo-poo it either. You know, I saved up to buy my guitars and all that stuff. So it's always been me kind of like just earning my way up into it. So anyway, after, I don't know, this must have been like maybe freshman, sophomore year in high school, I got my first guitar. It's like one of those cheap $120 Fender Squiers that you get at Guitar Center, those starter packs. And so I locked myself in my room one summer. I think it was the summer going into freshman year in high school. And I said, I'm going to learn about 40 songs, or at least as many as I can. And I'm not saying there were difficult songs, but it helped me, you know what a power chord was, an open chord, those kind of fundamentals with that. And lucky for me that the internet existed and tabs were a thing on the internet. So that's how I taught myself. I didn't, how to play guitar. By the end of summer, my fingers were calloused and the whole thing was happening, and I've always been known to carry a tune at least decently. I've gotten a lot better throughout the years. And so at that time, I was I joined a band with my buddies in high school. We called ourselves Hamilhory. And Hamilhory, for those who aren't familiar, is a brand of pork rinds on The Simpsons.
Okay.
Very obscure reference. You can only really see that reference once in the episode of The Simpsons where Homer gets fat to go on disability. And when he's picking out things in the supermarket, one of the things he reaches for is this thing of pork rinds, and it's Hamilhory with a. But anyway, because we were big nerds, that was the name of the freaking band. Of course, that didn't. We all went our separate ways eventually, and then my cousins had a band, and they said, "Well, you play guitar now. Can you want to join us?" And their last name is Cruz, so they called themselves the Crusaders.
So let's go back to
Yeah.
with all this information, right? I want to get into specifics, the
sure.
nooks and crannies of it. So you said some of your first instruments were like some obviously big band stuff, the clarinet. You said
woodwinds,
So what gravitated you towards those specific instruments at first, even before picking up the guitar?
I landed on the clarinet because it just reminded me so much of the recorder that we all learned when we were in third grade, that little kind of fluty thing. But anyway, one of the other reasons why I gravitated towards the clarinet as my main instrument, even though I was fairly good at those other ones, was again with my parents. They exposed me a lot to that kind of folkloric Mexican music, which is very instrumental. I know there's different genres in that, with Mexican music, but
are you talking cumbia?
No,
Cumbia,
they call it banda or conjunto, which means both words mean a band, really. But I mean, it's when you know what it is, you kind of know what it is. So conjunto is like every possible brass and kind of instrument. Nobody's singing, but they're playing songs as an instrumental, and the clarinet is playing the vocals, or what would be the vocals. So I'm just like, oh, well, I want to be the vocals in this instrumental. So I picked the clarinet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would think, obviously, and, ever since I've heard Mexican music, as I'll call it,
Mhm.
I call it cumbia, or from what I've learned on this podcast, I think that's
That's a genre, yeah.
of that. I was always fixated on the accordion because that's very prominent in that specific field.
Norteña is what that. Yeah, so that's more from the northern. That's northern
usually
Mexico.
the one that everybody hears when they're blasting.
Oh, dude, yeah, it's and that because we're so close to the northern border of them, so we get that a lot. But there's other, mariachi comes from like Guadalajara, and there's other shit going on, throughout the whole country. Just like we have a bunch of shit happening here in the U.S. and other countries have their thing going on. But if it wasn't for the Germans, landing in Mexico, they wouldn't have the sousaphone. They wouldn't have that kind of papa kind of flavor to them. So thank the Germans for that.
See, and I have always loved that stuff.
Mhm.
I love music just for music.
Yeah, for music's sake.
Whatever I'm feeling, that's usually what the kind of music I'm listening to is, right? Now, it's kind of funny that you were exposed to so much music at a time when you were almost like a sponge, especially pre-teen, your mind's just developing. So if you're hearing all this different kinds of flavors and different kinds of music and whatnot, that really develops your palate as far as an appreciation for music in general. And I always say you can appreciate life more because you're more developed to appreciate different kinds of things. So in saying that, applying it to all these different kinds of instruments, you probably had a more appreciation for them than, say, somebody that wasn't exposed to certain kinds of music at a young age. Would that be fair to say?
I think so. I think I always kind of looked at it with a very open mind too. So kind of taking little influences from the many things that I've been exposed to really helped kind of just broaden those horizons and expand on them. So when I joined my cousins and they were starting to write or toying with the idea of writing original music, it was by no means was it good, trust me, but it was something. Again, you just got to start doing it, and you grow from there, and you take some elements from the scene that's happening at that time, which was the early 2000s, and the stuff that you've been exposed to up until then. So That I grew tremendously in that band. Because I'm not a Cruz, like my last name isn't Cruz. We changed our name to the Bar Show. And can you imagine 17-year-old just playing every weekend at a bar where everybody's at least 21 years?
Well, that happened at a specific time,
Mhm.
which it should always be that time.
Mhm.
That should never go away, right?
Yeah.
But I want to go to this point. What part of the states are you from? Are we talking about here?
Oh, born and raised in LA County.
Okay, so we're talking LA County. So did you start to notice a more developed community of bands when you guys were playing? And what was the first band you mentioned
With Hamilhory?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, being in high school and having, just hanging out at the quad at lunch, I wasn't the only kid with a guitar, just playing and then every guy with a guitar, we all knew each other. We all shared ideas with each other. We would jam at the quad, maybe even put on a mini little show, depending if we knew the same song or not. But yeah, we started seeing a bunch of like little bands kind of spark up there. One of the bigger scenes that was happening at that time when I was in high school was in Whittier. It was around that Whittier area. Again, going back to being a big fan of Antagonist and everything that was happening at Skateland, I think, at that time. So I was very much into that scene at that time, very much into metal at that time, even though I had been exposed to plenty of other rock, types of rock and roll, but that was what I was gravitating towards then. But meeting and networking with other bands and just, kind of experiencing what they were going through, because we would maybe put ourselves into and when sharing ideas, and that hasn't changed, I don't think. But yeah, there was quite a bit of bands that were sprouting at that time.
Was it more of a hardcore kind of metal scene, like a metalcore thing, or was it like
It was everything. It was everything. You had your one particular evening at Skateland would have a punk band, a hardcore punk band, a oi band, a metal band, a hardcore band, a metalcore band. I mean, just different. And I mean, as far as I knew, everybody who was singing on a microphone was that guy screaming his heart out, and it was amazing. It was amazing to be a part of that mosh pit for sure.
Did you record any demos with Hamilhory or any of the? I mean,
they're probably lost by now. Yeah, we on a cassette. Yeah, we probably did. There's probably a few cassettes out there. That's back when cassettes were still a thing, sort of. They were kind of being phased out, but yeah, we pressed record, kind of put it at the corner so it wouldn't be so busy and peaking, But yeah, there's probably a couple of cassettes out there that I remember maybe even digitizing one of them. But after so many computers, they're probably in a hard drive somewhere in a garage. Yeah.
Oh, hopefully you still have those,
Maybe.
But so was this more of a rehearsal demo kind of deal, or I'm
the one with Hamilhory was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the one with the Bar Show, we actually we went into a studio, kind of JV. The guy, like the producer, was also starting out, so he gave us a great deal. So we were kind of some guinea pigs for him too. So I'm not gonna say it sounded great. Not only the production quality didn't sound great, we just didn't sound great because we were not as experienced, And I think as songwriters, we hadn't flourished like we have recently. So yeah, and I've been in a couple other bands since then, and now I'm in Fall Electric, and I can talk about those, man.
Well,
Because it's been a road.
We'll get there.
Yeah,
I promise you, we'll get there. Right.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next chapter. So when you picked up the guitar, who were you trying to emulate at first, and why the decision to pick up a guitar rather than say a bass or drums or just the vocalist?
Yeah.
Or I mean, where does that whole thing come from? What were some of the bands that were?
Well, I'm remembering that particular time, that specific time. I was a huge fan of John Frusciante, Tom Morello, Blink-182, Green Day, all those punk, Offspring, all those bands that were huge at that time.
Some 41.
But and then of course, trying to emulate your Mike McCready's from Pearl Jam, and Tool was, all those bands that were at the height of their powers in those early 2000s. New metal was taking over too, so Korn, all that shit that was happening. I don't think that I was trying to sound like one person, but maybe a combination of all those cats that were just doing their thing. I was just exposed to so many genres in such a small amount of time. I can't say that I was trying to sound like one person. Now, if you ask somebody else who might be well versed in those different kinds of genres, and then I played for them, they'd probably say, yeah, dude, you probably grab a lot of influence from Mike McCready. Three main guys: Mike McCready of Pearl Jam, John Frusciante of the Chili Peppers, and Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine. That's where my natural songwriting sounds like when it's all said and done.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting combination.
Isn't it?
That
It's
is an interesting
weird.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much Lollapalooza. Let's just say Lollapalooza. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So after picking up the guitar, you stressed that you learned 40 or so songs, just
Give or take. Yeah.
over the course of a summer, and developed your skills and whatnot at that specific time. Now, did you start to notice an influx of musicians around your school, and that's how your bands got started at first? Or
Yeah. There was a great scene happening at my high school, particularly. Well, I went to Nogales High School, the home of the Octomom. That's where she went, and I think there's been a couple other people that household names from there. But yeah, a lot of bands, and that's where the whole emo scene was happening. So those bands that were coming out of my high school and the surrounding high schools in that area were gravitating towards that new genre. And I wouldn't say it's a new genre. That genre has been around since the 80s, but it was peaking quite a bit in those early 2000 years. And so I was kind of going out of my way not to do that. And I don't know if it hurt me or helped me. Honestly, I think it hurt me because I was apprehensive in networking with them when it came to a musical standpoint. It could have been the circle of friends that I was around where they might have been a little too cool for school to accept that type of genre. I never hated the genre. In fact, I enjoy quite a few bands in that genre. In fact, I got my ticket to the what's that show coming up in Vegas in October? The When We Were Young show. I got my ticket for that, and I'm excited. But I think now that I think about it, I might have hurt my networking abilities when I was in high school because I went out of my way to stay away from that scene, and that's what was really flourishing. I don't know. I think that was a missed opportunity. You can't go back unless you have a time machine. So, but I networked with an older crowd because me and my cousins and our buddy Richie, who was our drummer there, because we were playing all these bars, we were playing with those Gen Xers that were out there doing that thing, and so I mean, there was no love lost there. We stayed busy. It was just not the network that was age appropriate, I guess. You know what I mean? But I think I still grew from the experience either way.
Well, absolutely. Everything works out for a reason. Obviously, you made friends with people and jammed with people and had bands. So obviously it didn't hurt that much as you think. Now, did you start to develop an influx of support from your peers at that time, or more? Did people start to care about your said bands in high school, or did you make any sort of impact? Or
actually, our my buddy Richie, who was the drummer of the bar show, his family was always awesome. His mom in particular, they had a house there in I think it's West Covina. And we would throw parties, like backyard parties, and we would headline. We'd have other bands come and join us that were in our high school. Of course, they played that post-hardcore emo stuff. We didn't. We wrote more of that grungy alternative 90s kind of style. I've always gravitated towards that because that's what I grew up with. But but we threw some gnarly parties, dude. Like, it was crazy. And we're talking, we were all a bunch of high school kids throwing parties that would rival a lot of like 20-year-old, 30-year-old people having parties. And we'd invite anybody who was willing to come. It was free. Bring a case of beer and a good attitude, and we'd have an awesome time. Those I think those parties were legendary. Those are pretty legendary. And we had, while we didn't have a following, I wouldn't say, or maybe we did, but who knows? I mean, we never really played a whole lot of shows that required us to sell tickets, maybe a couple of times. A lot of these times we were playing for 2 or 3, 4 hours at a bar, and that's how we made our cash to put towards recording.
Now, were you playing a lot more cover songs around this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of them were covers, and but we would sprinkle in our originals that we would write too throughout that. I still do that in this current band, which we'll get to, I'm sure. But I think that's it helped me kind of flex that muscle of different genres when we were playing. So we would incorporate that when we would headline these backyard shows, and having people sing along to a cover that everybody knew, and then play a song, and then find out that they knew the words to our songs was an incredible thing to witness. And just going through those years in high school where you're incredibly awkward. You don't know what to do with your hands sometimes. My hair was in my face at the time. It's just going through that acne phase. It was just crazy. But yeah, we had some good people who would join us in those parties, and they still talk about it. They're like, "When's the bar show getting back together?" I was like, "That's not up to me, man. That's up to those guys."
Now, even playing your first show, what did that specific moment teach you as a human being around that specific time? Because you learn a lot about yourself, I would say, as a performer, when you're playing those first shows and being all nervous to get up on that stage and just, am I ready for this?
I remember the car ride. Yeah, I remember the car ride to one of those first shows. I think it was in Corona. We played a backyard show. I think it was for I think it was a bachelor party. It was a backyard bachelor party. We weren't the only band there, but I remember my leg was shaking on the van drive there, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's happening. It's getting real," And there was there was at least 50 people at that house that day, and so we get there, and I get in front of everybody. We start doing the show, and I start realizing, for good and bad reasons, nobody cares. Nobody cares. For bad reason, because I'm trying to freaking put on a show here, pay attention, kind of thing. And good reason is, like, if I make a mistake, nobody cares.
Well, it's a lot of that is I'm trying to express myself. It's again, I think playing music for me is more of a selfish reason, because I like to. That's how I express myself and whatnot. For you, what was your motivation to wanting to play music?
I've always liked to entertain. So I guess while I want to do it for me, for my own personal growth and enjoyment, I always want to make sure that somebody's having a good time watching me do it. So I think that's where a lot of the preoccupation was coming from, of like, are people going to enjoy this? I've always been a big, it's always been huge for me to try to put on the best show possible. And throughout the years, I learned how to move around. Your stance has a lot to do with it. Your posture, that kind of thing. And that it's night and day. If anybody took a VHS of that night, I'm not that guy anymore. That's for sure. But you kind of have to fail to learn. But we failed quite a bit. Just like the podcast, you have a lot of shitty shows before you actually say, "Hey, that was a good one. That one's for the books."
Do you think you apply that same mentality to starting the podcast as well?
Oh yeah, and I think that's why.
Okay,
and I think that's why I like to entertain. I listen. While I could be pretty brutal when I take jabs at my buddies, I would hate to know that I hurt somebody's feelings. So there's always this comfort level when I do the podcast, and there's always some kind of maybe apprehension when I have a guest on. It's like, well, I'm going to see how far I can go without crossing a line, kind of thing. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to piss anybody off. I don't want to hurt their feelings. That would be the last thing I want to do.
Well, that's not your set agenda or anything. You're just trying to have fun, which is obviously that everybody should just try and have fun.
Right. Right.
Now let's move back into your specific musical journey here, and I'm kind of curious when the next transition happened for you after I guess your high school days, and did you what were some of the styles of music you played after this?
A lot of classic rock. Like I don't want to call it regression, lack of a better term, but it's just I was going back in time with the types of music that I wanted to rediscover, I guess, because I had always been in this bubble of the 90s and that early 2000s scene that I'd been exposed to because of my pretty much my high school, mates. So there was a lot of that going on. After college, I didn't do much musically, surprisingly. There was like this period where I said, well, I guess I'm going to join the rat race. I'm going to put on a suit and a tie. I'm going to go to work every day. I'm going to see what I can do about getting a house as early as possible in my life. And, I've been pretty disciplined to be able to achieve that kind of stuff. But am I fulfilled? I don't know, man. Let me pick up my guitar again. I dusted my guitar off. I plugged it in, and I'm just like, fuck. I need to just do this. I know that it was what was keeping me sane throughout high school and college, and then the fact that I put it down because I was joining the rat race after that. I don't know. I think that's what contributed to a lot of my stress, and I've always been an introspective guy. Being an only child. In a home where I didn't share the same ideals, beliefs, culture that my parents did, I was always in my head about everything. So, and it's funny, you get the guys on the podcast make fun of me because when I my internal monologue is in Spanish when I think to myself. So this is my second language. And so it's interesting to look at a world through that lens. But anyway, after not playing for such a long time, I came back to it, and I can thank an acquaintance that I had in high school. His name's Chris, and he had a band going on called The Hotline. And in The Hotline, I didn't know the other guys, but he's just like, "Hey, man, you still play guitar?" We found each other on Facebook again. Well, we never lost touch, I don't think. But he hits me up, and I'm just like, I haven't played in a very long time, but I can play. I can still do it. I can sing. What do you need me to do? So I show up to a couple of his rehearsals, and they're at this in Covina. There was this rehearsal space there, and that's what we frequented, and we even frequented one in Whittier, Santa Fe Springs area there. And so we did that for like a couple of years. They accepted me in the band almost immediately, but there was always a struggle, and it's any musician will tell you, it's you got to pick the right combination of guys to be able to write music to. I mean, you can play covers, you can, the song's already written, you just got to copy what they do, or maybe even add some kind of flavor to it. But when you're trying to write something, you got to make sure everybody's on the same page. We just weren't on the same page. As talented as everybody was individually, I don't think that we meshed well. There was, it could have been a personality thing, but I just found myself, at least personally speaking, I don't want to speak for them, but I could not write with them as freely as I used to. And I don't know, maybe holding up a mirror to myself, maybe it was my fault, because I'm always in my head about everything. I catch mistakes pretty quickly, and I don't want those mistakes to happen again. So after we were done playing the song, I would always interrupt saying, you played that wrong. Can we go over that? And I knew that they would get annoyed by that by quite a bit. And I said, well, this is how we kind of grow. I don't think that they were into that. I find myself flourishing with my current band because they take that constructive criticism well.
But so let me ask you this real quick, because obviously there's no rehearsals when doing podcasts in general. I'm assuming you don't apply the same method into the Foobar show. I haven't noticed that, where it's like, oh wait, can we do this again? Because usually podcasts are just it is what it is kind of thing. But for you're just talking rehearsing and whatnot. So you don't let it flourish into playing the whole song in its entirety and then going back to that specific part.
When I was brand new, yeah, I'd do that. But when I got more comfortable, I'm just like, stop, stop. That doesn't sound right. Let's, and then, I don't think they like that a whole lot. So there's that. I mean, I know when I'm doing it, but sometimes it's just like, no, dude, just if you don't say something, you're gonna hate yourself tonight, or you're not gonna be able to sleep, or I don't know, it's gonna bug me because I've always been very neurotic that way. And then expanding on what you said about the podcast, yeah, sure, it's it's one take, but that doesn't mean that notes aren't being taken or that we're using it as game tape to then say, okay, well, we did this here, and let's fix this for the next episode, kind of thing. So we use it as game tape to get better and better and better, especially when I'm editing the video portion. I have to re-listen to the audio anyway, and I catch little things. It's like, hey man, you said something wrong there. Actually, you in the next episode, you may want to say, hey, correction, this news article wasn't accurate, or things like that.
When you first started to do the podcast, were you? I know you can articulate well nowadays. When you first started, how did you approach that, knowing that maybe you weren't going to articulate as well as you wanted to at that time? You have to kind of keep doing it and get better and whatnot. But at that specific time, where was your starting point getting into podcasting? And obviously this is a little bit after the Fallen Electric started, correct?
Yeah, not too far after, though. Around the same time, I would say. Well, the Fallen Electric was already a band before I joined. But yeah, with the era of me being in there, yeah, it was pretty close together, actually. Yeah.
So where was your starting point in terms of the podcasting, and just and then obviously you are finding yourself every day, but I'm talking at that point, where was your starting point?
I guess again, like, I was a huge fan of Adam Carolla, and when he left, when KLSX shut down and he didn't have a radio show anymore, he went to podcasting, which was my kind of introduction to podcasts. And then that's how I was just like, oh, he's not the only guy doing this. There's Rogan doing it, and everybody started kind of doing their podcast, but he was one of the OGs. And because of the way he does it with that intro segment, stuff like that, I was like, well, let me start emulating what I enjoy, again, like Kevin and Bean and stuff like that. Let me see where this goes, and if we have to change it, we'll change it. It's not set in stone. So far it's worked out, and we've expanded on that, and it's a different, not a fundamentally different show, but it is quite a bit different than it used to be. So I mean, that's where it was all coming from. It's just grabbing that influence. And again, there was I know Masterclass now is a big thing, but back then the Masterclass website, or you've heard of the service, right? Masterclass, it was brand new, and there wasn't a lot of classes, and one of them was Adam Carolla How to Start a Podcast. So I subscribed to it, and that's how I kind of took direction on the fundamentals of equipment, how to speak with each other, listening to him and other comedians that are like him, Will Ferrell, other people who have gone to like the Groundlings or Second City, people who end up at SNL and shit like that. They all follow the same fundamentals of improv, which is, like I said earlier, yes, and not only that, but is how you contribute to a conversation. If you stop somebody from talking, or you negate what they just said, the conversation comes to a screeching halt, and where are you going to go from there? And if we're trying to do a podcast, it's over an hour long. That's not going to work out.
When was the moment when you started to develop your ear, not your mouth and articulation, but your ear, just to listen to people?
I think that as an introvert and being as neurotic as I am, all I do is listen. I think I listen first and speak after. And while I may interrupt somebody, it's because I'm trying to really get a rise out of them. But I mean, just naturally, I'm not as talkative as I seem to be right now. I'm not. I'm just not. I think I think that I've gotten pretty good at listening first and then reacting. A bunch of shit's going on in my brain while all this is happening. But I want to maintain some level of respect and that kind of thing, but also following those fundamental rules of improv. And I've only taken one improv class, but I took so much away from it. So much away from it. Honestly, is one class, one day. I didn't take a course, but I went to one day an improv class, and what I took away from that day was awesome. I kind of wish I would have stuck by it. Maybe I'd be in a different position than I am now, but just picking up those little tools have helped me tremendously.
Well, what did you pick up specifically? Give me at least one that kind of changed your whole perspective.
It was those fundamentals I mentioned. I didn't know that they all followed these rules. That if it, like yes and is important, or if you're not going to necessarily agree with them, or you want to add to the sentence. Well, yeah, not only that, but finish the freaking sentence. You know what I mean?
I see.
So it's those are the main tools. And if you talk to anybody in improv and you even say yes and, they're gonna know what you're talking about. They know exactly what you're talking about, because that's kind of like even it's even tongue in cheek even at this point. That they all follow those rules.
Right, but at the same time, it's imperative that you have that, especially if you want to get into podcasting and radio in general. It's just nice to have those. Like I never had those fundamentals. I'm just winging. Yeah. I've winged it for 10 years at this point. I just like talking to people and getting their specific stories, and in turn, gaining experience has taught me a lot. Right. Obviously, I would love to take the class, and I probably will. Yeah. Right. And in the near future, but right at this moment, I've had so much experience where I've learned I've picked up on things along the way.
Yeah. And then something else that I did for 6 months was Toastmasters. That helped tremendously. You got a guy in the back of the room saying, "Hey, you said like 30 times during that 5-minute speech, bro." Like just calling you out on all your shit and all the things you did wrong that you can improve on. But it's all in good fun. Everybody's doing it so that they can improve. And so all that stuff helps. Yeah, dude, it's been a cool ride, but I don't know where we're at now.
So where we're at now, we'll get back to it. It was just I like going on these tangents and just learning a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
So where we were at now was obviously the college years and whatnot, and you kind of being in more classic rock oriented bands and getting those specific fundamentals back into your repertoire.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious, did that help you mentally speaking around this time period? Because I know you said you were frustrated just getting out of high school and being
joining the rat race.
Yeah, joining the rat race.
Yeah.
But did that specific thing help you? And then obviously get to the podcasting and the Fallen Electric?
I think so.
Is that your stepping stone, I guess is what I'm asking?
Well, yeah, and my experience with the hotline got me back into like warming up back into the scene, into that music scene, and collaborating with other musicians and meeting new people, because we were part of like lineups, and several other venues that were new to me. And so at a certain point, we played with this band that's still going on, 22 Salute, in at the Chain Reaction. They headlined and we opened up for them. And their drummer at the time, Travis, a real cool guy. He says we booked other shows with them, so that wasn't the only show we played, but beyond that we played maybe 2 or 3 more shows. And I became pretty friendly with Travis, and then he started doing this thing where he was inviting other people. So there's this bar/restaurant in Pomona called the Metro. And And I think it was every Wednesday evening at like 6 or 7 p.m. he would invite other bands to join up at the Metro, and we would talk shop. We would talk, what are you guys doing where do you get your merch made? Who do you, how do you hit up a venue to get booked there? Stuff like that,
Almost like a seminar or something
exactly. And we dubbed it kind of tongue in cheek the League of Incredible Musicians or something, like, of extraordinary musicians. We called it the League. But anyway, because of that, I became friendly with other bands that are still going on today, namely the Fallen Electric. I was not in that band yet. They were a 3-piece band, and Travis had left 22 Salute by then, and he was their drummer now. And towards the end of my time with the Hotline, I was getting a little irritated with how things were happening in that band. Again, I still love those guys, but I'm like, it's not for me. I guess this dynamic is not for me. I should begin to look elsewhere because I don't want to stop playing music. I don't ever remember saying this out loud, but Travis might have sensed something was happening. And so he invited me over pretty harmlessly. Just like, hey man, just come over to one of our rehearsals. And Montclair, Jimmy, the guitarist of the Fallen Electric, he had a place there, and we rehearsed in his garage. It was a real cool space, and I joined him for a Saturday. I brought my equipment, and it was probably the smoothest freaking rehearsal that I've ever, like, it was serendipitous, man. Like we clicked like that. All the songs that they were doing, because they were playing those 3-4 hour shows, a lot, mostly covers. Mostly, I would say. I already knew them from my time back in the bar show, probably 10 years before. So a lot of those covers, because they love the 90s. Jimmy and Drew, maybe not so much. He's significantly younger than us. But he appreciates the music. So those are all the covers. I was like, dude, I used to do all these songs back in the day. At that point, I think I already ended my time with the Hotline, and I'm just like, guys, I can do this full time. Like, just do you need a second guitar? Because they were a 3-piece band, and they're just like, you know what? After rehearsing with you a couple of times, I think it would add a lot to the band. That way he's not doing lead, vocal, rhythm. He has another guy kind of backing him up, and I could do harmonies. And I have a good ear for it. And Drew, the bassist, he has a good ear for harmony. So I think it was, it all came together, man.
Now, how did it change musically with you in it compared to the 3-piece? Now it's the 4-piece. So musically speaking, how did the style change?
I don't think it changed. I think that I think I assimilated to what they were trying to accomplish, and it wasn't hard because it's kind of what my goal was anyway. Again, it was 2-piece in a pod kind of, like, we fit. I wasn't trying to put a circle in a square peg or anything. It was we just kind of melted together. It worked out. And after a year or so, Travis made his way out, and there was a revolving door of drummers. I don't know what your experience with drummers has been, but I get what they mean in Spinal Tap. They don't stick around, bro. Like, except ours didn't blow up, every so often. But I get it. It's not easy keeping a good drummer,
Right. And it's both, you have to I always think of it as a relationship. I always like the fact that with us, we were all friends before the band. So it's just easier for us to talk to each other and communicate that way. Because the communication I've felt in bands is usually the make or break. Like, a lot of people don't like to communicate within their own bands. So that creates friction, and things tend to kind of, I don't know, you tend to push it down, and then eventually it'll just blow up in front of your face. So communication's key. That's what I found. But with drummers, a lot of drummers are in multiple bands too. So there's that dynamic as well. Right. For you, when did you actually start to record with them and write with them as the second guitar player, or do you know your role when it comes to just getting in there and just putting your take on their specific material.
Yeah, funny thing. When I joined, they all were already pretty elbow deep into their demo album. So I learned all of those songs. Like I'm just like I can't fuck this up. I can't like look stupid. I learned all of their songs in a weekend, and I shut myself. Like it took me back to my high school days. I'm gonna shut myself in my garage and learn all these songs by ear. And I did, and I showed up, and they're just like, well, we're gonna put a bow on this recording. It was kind of like a friend of theirs who was doing him a favor. He was getting started in producing, so we were recording all that, and but they were recording it as a 3-piece band. And then when I came in, I was just like, well, I learned your songs, and I learned some tangents or some harmonies that we can insert in here. You guys don't have to change a thing from what you've already recorded. I'm just check this out. Let me know what you think. And there was a few ideas. They're like, yeah, let's keep it all. Let's just add that guitar part to the existing track. And so I guess you can say that I did and I didn't help him write that first song because it was already written, but I did add my flavor to it, which didn't change the genre, didn't change the fundamental idea of what they were trying to accomplish. And if anything, I'd like to think that I enhanced it. And now that because I was writing to a song, not helping him write a song from the ground up, I think now as a band, we are different. It's more of it's more melodic and harmonic even than it was before. Before they were, I guess if you want to compare Dinosaur Jr. with Nirvana, or at least maybe post Nevermind Nirvana, where it's more melodic, rather than it just being kind of like that grungy for the sake of grunge. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's hard to put together an example, but I hope I'm making myself clear with that.
Right. Well, you absolutely are, and it's kind of cool. You're almost like a utility player.
Yeah.
You find the specific niche and you just fit in with it rather than go against the grain. Especially, so that's probably why it's worked so well for you. Did you start to incorporate do you incorporate vocals in this specific project, or are you just okay?
Yeah, so I did bring some harmonies into it too, or some new ideas where I said, what if I don't need to do that harmony, but if you did it this way, kind of thing, because it wasn't done yet, we could have retracked, and we did. But I brought some ideas in there, and they were very open-minded to what I had to bring. And I think not only that, but one of the things that bugs me is chaos. Lack of communication. It's kind of like what you were talking about. If you don't communicate, you're not going to flourish. Things are going to hit the fan. Nobody's going to be happy. There's going to be arguments. So, I'd like to think that I brought a lot of organization too. And I guess I could say I got that from joining that rat race for those few years where I was very, heads down worker in a corporate kind of environment kind of thing. But just I've always had a discipline about everything from the ground up ever since I was a small child. But when I joined them, I said, well, guys, let's maintain a calendar. Let's have a freaking whiteboard. Let's write down some ideas. Everything was just off the cuff kind of thing. Nobody remembered what they talked about or what kind of ideas they brought to the table in one particular rehearsal. I would encourage them to just get your phone out, press record on the voice memo, and let's, we can use it for a later time. So it's just kind of it's the little things even that really would help us out. And I don't want to say that we're a different band from when we were when I joined them, but it's significantly more enhanced than it was. And with our new producers that we have that are like 6 minutes from this place, that they have been our North Star in the last couple of years as far as how to even like promote and get around to network and just deal with it and just deal with the whole industry.
Have you found with just you even doing the podcast, it's helped your connections and applying those connections to the Fallen Electric in general?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, you know what, now that I think about it, that's another reason why I wanted to do the podcast. I did want to reach out to other musicians, other podcasts, just to network. I'll say, even selfishly, just to see what can I get out of this? Well, what kind of knowledge or can I gain from speaking with this person who I would have otherwise not spoken to? It doesn't necessarily seem like such a cold call. When I'm a podcast, they want to promote something. I have the,
avenue,
I have the
vehicle.
avenue. Yeah. And so it's easier. It's not so much of a, me showing up, I'm not trying to sell you Bibles at your front door kind of thing, where you can just shoo me away. So it does make it a lot easier.
Do you tend to like focus in on the relationship more than what you can get out of this? Because I've always, as a fellow journalist myself, I've always wanted, it doesn't matter about the what I can get from this person. I'd much rather just be at least friends with them and have that sort of connection. And then down the line, say, if he or she needs something, he reaches out to myself, I'll help out. Or if I need something, I'll reach out, and most of the time they'll help out. Right. Did you want to lock on to more, just developing more friendships out of this rather than I always thought that was the foundation. And then, down the line, if they had something to share that I can use, of course, let's talk. But did you also know that if there's something that you have, then and that person can use it, then sure as well. So it's obviously that give and take.
Of course. Okay. Yeah. And like I said earlier, I have no problem sharing, like what I did with you, just to make it better, because I mean, what am I going to gain from not, helping somebody out? If anything, you're going to gain a friend or somebody who you can trust in later time.
And it's not even another faction to this too, is it applies to all genres. It's just like a human connection rather than this genre specific connections, right? You play in a more, I would say, rock oriented style band, right?
Yeah.
I'm in an extreme metal band. But yet here we are talking, and obviously we're friends. So, but I'm saying that's the most important aspect to what we do.
Yeah,
is these kind of relationships.
Yeah, totally.
Because you never know, there are avenues in the rock or indie world that do apply to the heavy metal kind of world, right? It's all connected. You see the same people everywhere.
Yeah,
it's so small. Your scene and our scene, one and the same. We're all connected.
Yeah.
So despite how heavy you play or how light you play, if you play rock music, chances are the same people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I discovered pretty quickly. You just like, oh, he's there. So let me go up to him and tell him, hey, man, I've seen you at quite a few venues or shows. Let me introduce myself. What are you doing here? What do you, what's up? You just kind of build a connection.
Yeah. And it almost hurts if you don't help that said person, because everybody knows about it.
Right.
That's how small the community is.
Yeah. People talk for sure. There's everybody has a reputation, and, there's a few people who have done me dirty or my band, and, we remember and we know not to do that again, and we
know to inform others to not. But
tread lightly, at least, if you're going to go for it,
Correct. Where are you guys in terms of recording and whatnot? You said you did the demo with them, but did you do an album immediately after joining this project with so you do the demo first? Did you do an album? Have you done a full length record with them?
No. And you know what, man? I don't know that we will. I think that it's we're in a unique position these days where a lot of people are gravitating more sadly towards singles rather than full-length albums. I love throwing on an album. People criticize me, at least if they share a car ride with me. If I'm putting on something on the radio, we're listening to the whole goddamn album. It's an experience. People don't really kind of have that in them anymore. And even then, have you ever been a passenger in a car where like somebody puts on a song, midway through it changes it to another one, midway through it changes it to another? Like, that's so annoying to me. I'd rather just leave it on, just leave it alone. Listen to the album, experience it, because that's, if somebody's putting out an album, they want you to listen to it they don't want you to shuffle it, they don't want you to listen to the freaking artwork that they put out.
See, I like investing my time into that one specific thing. It's like a movie. Imagine changing a movie halfway through and getting really into it, changing it.
Exactly.
Changing it. It's the same concept. It's all art, so it's obviously one and the same, but that's what I equivalent it to. If you're going to watch a TV show or a movie, you got to watch the whole thing.
Right.
Got to get that experience from that. So with an album, I apply that same things. Like, that's why when I bought my car, I'm like, I have to have a CD player. There's no way I'm not doing this digital bullshit. I'm old school. I have my CDs. I like my CDs. Physical media, I like that. So put it on. If I want to jam a specific said record and get into that band's music, that's what I want to do.
Right.
And especially with being a journalist, such as ourselves, it's nice to have that new CD where you're going to interview them and whatnot and learn about the CD. Like I'm almost forced to listen to it in my car. Right. There's so many other distractions everywhere else.
And something that being interviewed by other radio shows or podcast hosts, one thing that I rarely get, which it would be nice to hear every now and then if we're talking about an album, is song placements in that album. There's a specific reason why the artist put that song there in that particular order, or if it's some kind of progressive album, one may spill into the next, or that kind of thing. So and I think it's just because of the times. We're more of a single driven culture now rather than an album driven culture. And I think not because we want to, I just think that that's how our music will be more easily digested by the people who we know enjoy us. And but that doesn't mean we won't put together an album. What I think what I'm saying is that we'll release singles, and after we get a dozen or so, we'll maybe record a couple other ones that aren't released and then package them into an album.
But again, I always think from a marketing perspective, I would much rather just market an album rather than single after single after single after. From a marketing standpoint, I would just want to put my eggs into that basket and move on from there, rather than having to go back after putting out all these fucking singles, putting it on a record, and then putting out an album after that, even though that's the same old material that's been put out previously.
I've always joked with the guys. I said, well, with all these singles, we won't have a choice but just to put together a best of and call it an album, or a volume 1, volume 2. I mean, every album we can just, to be funny, we'll just call it the best of so far kind of thing, because that's what it is.
Exactly. But there's also, I've had this same conversation with other musicians, and they agreed with me on this. Is people look down on bands who don't put out albums, especially in the heavy metal world. I've always felt like we're so passionate with our bands, and the album is what counts, not the EP or the singles. They kind of get overlooked. I don't know how it is in the rock and pop world. Maybe you can.
It's the other way around, yeah. And that's why we kind of are doing what we're doing. If it were up to me, we'd write albums. I'm right there with you, because I do believe that that's a better listening experience. But the audience that we're attracting doesn't foster that belief. So doesn't mean doesn't mean we won't write an album. I just think that for people to start paying attention, we need to just tailor our efforts to that.
Do you think that music videos play more of a part? The visual aspect plays more of a part though than the audio? Because to me, that's where it's at
these days. Yeah, especially these days.
Music video over just releasing a single with a piece of art.
Yeah,
got to take the video.
Yeah. It's it's ever since we've had music videos, it's been kind of the way to go. You can't not.
Maybe that's how you do it. You release the single as a music video rather than just releasing it as a single.
As just an audio. Yeah.
Maybe that's a better marketing strategy.
Could be.
Because music videos, that's people look at that as like, oh, this is a big deal.
Yeah. And you know what's cool about these days is it doesn't have to be a high production video either. I mean, you got people on TikTok getting famous off some shit, like literal grainy shit. It doesn't have to be so fancy these days, which is awesome. I like that everybody's just kind of come back down to earth with that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be anything so extravagant.
Well, for our music video, it literally costed us like $500 or
Yeah.
$500-600. We literally just did it in the woods near here, and that's the music video.
Nice.
And then the live shots are done. We're done at the Riff House, so it was like we just rented that place out for a day, and that's it.
Our most recent music video for our song "Move to the Sound," I told my drummer Charles, I'm like, bro, just bring your GoPro, and we'll trust me. And I brought a light, and we fucking just did it. We filmed ourselves going around. We pumped the song through the speakers so that we all played in time with it, and then I edited it on the same app that I used to edit the podcast video. Like it was not a big deal, and it still came out in 4K. So like, what the fuck? Like we don't have to get so fancy with it. I mean, if we wanted to get like fancier with like a storyline behind the video, sure, okay, we'll burn some calories there in the next one, but it doesn't have to be so fancy these days.
No, it doesn't have to be extravagant either. The concept of the video doesn't really have to be that extravagant. It can be a simple thing and just branch off of that simple thing for 4, 3, 5 minutes, however long the song is.
Right.
So, okay, so you guys are releasing singles as of this moment, right? I know you're recording and whatnot with the Fallen Electric. Now, how are you going to, I guess, market this said single, and how do you want to portray it this time around compared to the last couple that you've done?
I think this is probably our most pop sounding song, the one that we're currently recording. We're going to add the drums tomorrow as we record this, and this one has to have a music video. We've already discussed pretty much what you've been saying is the conversation that's been happening at rehearsals, is the strategy, building relationships with radio stations, internet and terrestrial throughout the world. We've already built some relationships in the UK, in Mexico, Canada, Australia. So it's just and they're poised to hear about when we're about to release something. So those things are very important for us. We can't thank them enough, because they're the ones, they're the vehicle who put it out there and get people to listen. So it's been very grassroots so far, and I think if with the money that we've been generating from playing these cover shows, and I mentioned it earlier, we play 4-hour shows at these bars and venues, and it's like, I think lately it's been 50-50. We can do 2 hours of original music, no problem, but if you want asses and seats and dancing along and singing along to shit that's familiar to them, you gotta insert some covers. So it's half and half right now. And it's a lot of that 90s stuff, early 2000s stuff that people would sing along to. But I think we're gonna dedicate our efforts to throwing some money at some promotion for sure, because I think that's the only way to get off the ground sometimes, especially these days.
Yeah, you almost have to. You almost have to hire a PR company or whatever that that's the way to go, right? So let's go to like what you're kind of doing now with the Fallen Electric and the Foobar show, respectfully, and how you kind of balance scheduling and how often does the Foobar show actually air?
There's a new episode every Monday, so there's that, and we can either record Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, depending on when I don't have a show that week. The Fallen Electric is rather busy, especially in 2021. We were playing maybe twice a week. I mean, I would love to play more than that, but that's what we were doing. And, these days it's just been, I think we've been normally recording on Sundays for the most part, because I'll have a show Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. So that's kind of, and if I end up having a show on Sunday, then we'll just record, one of those other days. So it's not too big of a deal, especially now these days with everything being as digital as it is, and the flexibility that we've gotten with those apps like Zoom or things like that, where we can go remote, and the quality of the audio isn't so compromised by doing so, as long as I provided them with the equipment to be able to sound like, so that it doesn't sound like crap. So it doesn't sound like all the mids are up and somebody's on the phone, So there's that. So we've kind of learned from that. When we first started doing the remote thing, it sucked. There was a delay. There was a whole thing, but we managed. And I think we can. In this most recent episode that we put out, Josh was remote, and if you're just listening to it on audio, and if we didn't mention it in the podcast, you probably wouldn't have known that he was remote. I think it sounded okay considering. But yeah, to answer your question, that's kind of how we fix our schedules around, just so to make it work. We're flexible.
Now, lastly, I want to thank you for coming on and hanging with me for a few. I really do appreciate your time and going through your said journey and whatnot.
Yeah, it's fun.
Where can people find the Foobar show and the Fallen Electric, and kind of keeping up to date with what you guys are doing?
Well, you can type those names into any social media, and they have their own respective .coms as well. The fallenelectric.com, Foobar show, that's FOOBarshow.com. And if you have a favorite podcast app that you use, we're likely on it. I've spread around that RSS link to all the major platforms and all the non-major platforms, so you can find us rather easily, even those crawler ones that just grab it without giving you any credit. I don't care. If you listen to us and you enjoy it, go for it. I do, and like I said, I edit the video component and put it up on Instagram, so you can watch practically the entire episode. The only part that you can't watch on Instagram and YouTube is the music highlights, because of copyright purposes. They'll block you, they'll take you down. So if you want to listen to that, just, open it up on our website. There's the player there, or you can just subscribe to your favorite podcast app. As far as the Fallen Electric, you can find us on any major platform as well. It'd be, if you type us in practically anywhere, it'd be, and if we're not on there, let me know. I'll put us on there. That's not a big deal, dude. Like we'll make it happen in a couple of weeks.
Now, lastly too, and you break up the Foobar show in segments. So if people don't like certain things, like if you're talking about the weather, chances are, unless you're into the weather, you might not want to listen to that, or sports, or music highlights, whatever it is. So I know you break it up into segments and whatnot. So everybody make sure to go check out Joe C. No, not the guy from Kid Rock, but Joe C.
Yeah, R.I.P., right?
That's right. Fuck yeah, dude. Fucking A. And the boys over at the Foobar show, and of course, the Fallen Electric. But Joe, thank you very much, seriously, for coming on and hanging. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Hey, you need to be on my show next, coming soon. So yeah, we'll look forward to that. We'll schedule that.
Looking forward to it. But another episode of Poppert's Corner, guys. We're out of here. Cheers.